Welcome to our video devotional for today, Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. Yesterday, I attempted to make a case in 5 minutes about being in connection with others. We need to. I think it's biblically oriented, biblically sound. And isolation can be depressing, and I want to say we best avoid it. However, there are clear times when God called for quarantine and isolation, and we're going to briefly examine those today. Got a lot of verses to read, and for the purpose of time, I'm just going to read some selected portions of Leviticus 13 and 14, not the entire chapters, but you may want to read through those two chapters and maybe others related and see how God cleansed the problem of leprosy in time when Israel was entering Canaan, and after they had already entered that land. In Leviticus chapter 13, I want to read in this chapter the first 14 verses of Leviticus 13. Here's what it says. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore. Then it shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons, the priest. The priest shall look at the sore on the skin of the body. If the hair on the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it's a leprous sore. Then the priest shall look at him and pronounce him unclean. But if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore 7 days. And the priest shall look at him on the 7th day, and indeed if the sore appears to be as it was, and the sore is not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. That's 14 total. Then the priest shall look at him again on the 7th day, and indeed if the sore is darkened, the sore is not spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab should at all spread over the skin, after he's been seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. And if the priest sees that scab has indeed spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest. And if the priest shall look at him, and indeed if the swelling on the skin is white, and it has not turned the hair white, and there's a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of the body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider it. Indeed, if the leprosy has covered all the body, he shall pronounce him clean. Who has the sore is all turned white, he is clean. But when raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. Now, I'm not intentionally not reading all of it, but you should examine it. Now, in chapter 14 of Leviticus, verse 33, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when you have come into the land of Canaan, which I give you as a possession, and I put the leprous plague in a house of the land of your possession, and he who owns the house comes and tells the priest, saying, seems to me there's some plague in the house. And the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes into it to look at the plague, that all that is in the house may not be made unclean. And after the priest shall go in to look at the house. And he shall look at the plague. And indeed, if the plague is on the walls of the house with ingrained streaks, greenish or reddish, which appear to be deep in the wall, the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again on the 7th day and look, and indeed if the plague is spread on the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which is the plague, and they shall cast them into an unclean place outside the city. And they shall cause the house to be scraped inside all around, and the dust that they scrape off they shall pour in an unclean place outside the city. Then they shall take other stones and put them in the place of those stones, and he shall take other mortar and plaster the house. And if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house after he has taken away the stones, after he has scraped the house, and after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look, and indeed if the plague is spread in the house, it's an active leprosy in the house, it's unclean. He shall break down the house, its stones, its timber, and all the plaster of the house, and shall carry them outside the city to an unclean place. Moreover, he who goes into the house that all well is shut up shall be unclean until evening. So he's going to be isolated till the evening. And he who lies down in the house shall wash his clothes, and he who eats in the house shall wash his clothes. But if the priest comes in and looks at it, and indeed the plague is not spread in the house after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the plague is healed. And then he talks about the sacrifice to be made for that cleansing. It's very, very interesting, because it's not apples to apples here, and I cautiously want to tell you that in cases where there is potential to spread a disease, that God called for quarantine and isolation. So today, many will disagree with the actual declaration of pandemic worldwide. The coronavirus or COVID-19 is real and is potentially dangerous for some. As in biblical record, to quarantine those carrying disease is often necessary. To shut down the entire culture is extreme. Partially because leprosy and COVID are not apples to apples, but they have some similarities. Obviously, I'm not going into great detail here because this is a devotional, not a doctoral thesis. Let's admit there's room for disagreement because of mutation, exhaustion, or expiration of the virus, lies, many lies about this whole thing. And who knows, all the political ramifications, greed involved, and actual jobs at stake in this process. And it just muddies the water all over. Perhaps way too many of us have lived past our means. And our biggest complaint is if we have to quarantine for 14 days, we're not able to pay our bills. And I'm just saying, maybe it's a wake-up call for some of us who've put too much on a credit card or overextended ourselves. I'm saying that because you probably need to hear it. Maybe we've bought into the supposition and theory which cannot be proven on multiple sides of this equation, and we're just looking for a fight. There has always been, and there will always be, spiritual forces at work to undermine our trust in one another and our trust in God. We are obviously to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling while treating others with deep respect, kindness, love, gentleness, and forbearance. That goes for all sides of this whole issue. I've had a close friend die after contacting COVID, though he had basically recovered from COVID. It had made him so weak that he died. I've had another good friend of mine spend over 40 days in ICU, most of which was spent in total isolation, never even got to see his family or listen to them because he was basically in a semi-conscious state. And everyone in his family had the disease, all 7 kids and his wife as well. This virus is real, there's no doubt about it. But over 99% of those who contact the virus in America survive it and live. Or they have some long-lasting effects. We don't really know the truth of all that. Some have, but how long's long-lasting? A month, 2, 6, 10 years? We don't know. Biblical precedent shuts down the sick, not the entire population. I am desirous for followers of Jesus to be sensitive and tender-hearted while speaking the truth that they know. You know you're going to be judged by your words. Matthew 12:37. You'll be justified by your words, and by your words you'll be condemned. And so here's what we need to do. If we know that some of the things that are being spoken in our lives, we need to tell the truth that we are aware of and we have facts to back it up. But we always need to be kind and tender-hearted. We need to speak to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. We need to sing and make melody in our heart to the Lord while guarding against words of condemnation, harshness, and judgment. We're in real tempestuous times. It's not like we haven't experienced difficulty before, some worse than this, and some not as harsh as this. Let's quit making it out to be more than it is and talking about how important leaders are in this time. Listen, you're a leader if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, and you're called to be an example of Christ to the world we live in. Let's act like that in a time when all these demands for quarantine and isolation are all around us. Father, may we be discerning, as we said yesterday, of the voice of the Spirit of the living God, and respond to people, all people, in the kindness and generosity of spirit that you have responded to us. Help us to know what to do in this day for your glory. Amen. Have a blessed day. Grace and peace all over you.